going to turn the program over to Steve. The floor is yours. Go right ahead.
Chris, thank you for having me again. This is going to be part 4. I will say that I initially planned on going some more into detail about the Christian nationalism movement, but some events since last week have accelerated so quickly, and they're moving to the center of events, that I thought it would be very good to give people a update on and a picture of what we're seeing, with the warning that I do believe there's going to be an attempt to completely destabilize the country this summer, even to the point of a full revolutionary activity. And I know that sounds a little bit over the top, but I think that we're looking at the people building to that capacity, notwithstanding whether they get there. What I want to do as I do this is kind of raise the point. We started this with the political warfare aspects of the Islamic movement integrated completely into the Marxist left. I think we've had some ability to do that. These slides, a lot of them will be snapshots, kind of organized in the same way they were last week, but kind of picking up where we went. The one point on stabbings, I'm going to repeat with a couple additional slides because I want to bring it home in a way that to remove any concepts that this is a theoretical notion. Our biggest picture, our biggest goal, going back to political warfare, and is the concept of the circle and people being trapped in a circle, and you need to get out of the circle. And if you're trapped in the circle, what you see is what you know. And what we want people to do is start knowing what they see. And I think this is going to be a very, very important thing. You know, I would like to say that in writing Catastrophic Failure, Blindfolding America in the Face of Jihad, there was one woman, her name was Christine Brehm, and she flogged me. I got scars on my back for getting that book out. You know, it was a big book, and I have to tell you something. To get that book to fit, we had to reduce the font to 0.8 on the footnotes, because the goal was, out of 160 or 70 pages of footnotes, the goal was of that book was to make it clear that if you want to disagree with us, you have to meet an evidentiary standard. And this is going to be a key point, because I think there's a lot of stuff I put out that's very heavy on trying to weight the argument in the facts. And we live in a world where people want to live in the narrative. And the narrative is living in the circle, or if you will, living in the matrix, if you want that metaphor. And so I really kind of want people to think of testing what they know and stop relying on 24-hour news cycles to tell you what to know and how to know it and how to make evaluations on it. The republic depends on it. What I'm going to do right now is go over to the brief. I will always repeat the first few slides if we talk about political warfare, because I think it's always going to be important to make sure people understand that we're really, it all is grounded here. And so what I wanted to do before I do that is, it's a quote I really like, and I know it's a verbose quote, but it's about the idea that we're always being asked to, could you make it simple so the average person can understand? And I mean, I think we really work hard at trying to bring things down. But at the end of the day, if the opposition works in college level differential equations, and you're not willing to go beyond 4th grade math, you can't get there. And it's my plea that the stuff we're teaching on political warfare is grounded in the dialectic, and you have to decide to know it. And I'll tell you, a part of deciding to know it is that you have to recognize that every time there's a dialectical attack, built into the dialectical attack is always an easy solution that allows you to feel like you're invested in a solution, completely avoiding the actual way to a solution that exists underneath it that requires someone to disorient themselves for a period of time. So I really like this quote: "The law of hierarchy goes to the law of travesty and parody. There is inspiration, no idea, or discovery that when mirrored in a lower intelligence at a lower level of the interhuman church, does not lose proportionality and value. If only sometimes of the original, however weakened, however dimmed, would endure. But since the difference of degree is often one of absolute quality, the diluted version becomes a parody of the higher. Inspiration, its parody, and the parody of its parody, They surround us in a constant clamorous collision. By endowing masks and facades with real existence, we find ourselves one day the victims of an illusion. And I think that this is maybe the epitaph for our country, that the other side is able to bring narratives down to your level on the other side because they command. Remember, we only operate on the application, and they are perfectly willing to win and lose at the application level because they completely own the operating system, and from there they dominate. They completely control the firmware. So there's no possibility of winning the game. That's kind of the matrix. And for us, our position is unconstrained analytics. What we call the firmware is the Platonic nightmare. And the Platonic nightmare is something that you have to start recognizing when you say you want to defend the West. The West is about this. It is this firmware. Outside of the Judeo-Christian ethic, and in many ways, at the cultural and civil level, at least appear, is the divide between Plato and Aristotle that runs through the entire history of the West. And what's happening right now is we're losing on that. So this brief is going to pick up where we left off last week, and I just want to point out that I put something out in early May before the Floyd incident called When a State Becomes a Counter State, Requiem for Minnesota, saying it was going to start in Minnesota and saying why. And this brief is going to have a flavor of, because we could see stuff escalating right now in April, so that it's going to hit its intensity mark in May. You know, typically if it's going to be in the US, they like to have it calibrated toward the end of May, but things are really moving fast right now. So who's going to say? Why? Because they want to run this all the way through the summer into the election season. And if there isn't somebody wants to get a hold of that, they need to do so now. So part of the stuff I briefed last week and this week, it really becomes important to go check this paper we have on our webpage. It's called Burning Down the House. And it basically explains how the Ummah has one level of capability, the Dawa entity, which is the Muslim Brotherhood in America, and then the jihadi element, which are the violent actors individually and collectively, most famously known as Al-Qaeda and ISIS. But in Nigeria, you have, I'm trying to remember the name, but they have their local names. So the Ummah entity are the OIC when it works together, or any leadership element in the Islamic world. And what we're seeing right now is we like to think that these are, coincidence of tens of thousands of people showing up on college campuses all around the West with the same level of violence, the same messaging, the same Marxist allies saying the exact same thing at every turn, and that is a coincidence. So that all we have to do is find these college radicals. As if this wasn't planned. Our position is that this was in the planning 2 years ago. We gave a clear warning when, I think I have the slides here, but I don't remember if I filtered them out, when the Chinese brokered the deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran, March of a year ago. So we really did see them building to this. We do kind of situate October 7th in the color revolution, black. And I think if you add that level, that dimension to it, you're going to see that this actually conforms to that narrative. And of course, I like to think I was one of the very early people who talked about the coalition of Marxists and Islamists will destroy the United States. I know Rich and I got the book that we got from somewhere South America, I think it was Brazil, I'm not sure, and got it translated. So here, again, I'm repeating myself, but I kind of want to point out in the spiritual dimension, the dialectic is recognized to have its occult characteristic, which carries over into Marxism by virtue of the fact that you see these people dressed, think of Antifa, in that kind of dark, esoteric garb. The devil always sends errors into the world in pairs, the thesis and the antithesis, the positive, the negative, or the universal and the particular, which is truer to the reality. Okay, pairs of opposites. He always encourages us to spend a lot of time thinking which is worse. You see why, of course. He relies on your extra dislike of the one error to draw you gradually into the opposite one. And what is the opposite one? Well, if maybe the fair and balance puts you in the circle to be deracinated and churned into nothing by MSNBC, maybe the element holding you in there is the element that's actually there to do the grinding action. So here we have the famous quote by the Chinese cardinals before 9/11 in 1999 on political warfare, where they basically said the United States completely lacks that they were going to wage political warfare against the United States. They completely lack the ability to understand this form of warfare, and they will never figure it out. I will not read this because I think you've heard it many times, but my point is we are 25 years into this doctrine, and we are starting to circle the drain. And there's clearly 2020 we designate as a revolution. We think this might be the second round on the same revolution. When you hear politicians use the word democracy, they're referring to the revolution from 2020. And when you hear Republicans use the word democracy, it's because they agree that they're going to use that word instead of the word republic. And it's very important. I think we have a couple slides to raise that. So the dialectic, Lenin said, is the theory of knowledge of Hegel and Marxism. Where I emphasize it, it's emphasized in his writing. This is the aspect of the matter. It is not an aspect of the matter. It is the essence of the matter. And that essence comes from the Latin essentia, which really leaks back to the word ousia in Greek, which is one of those gold standard terms in philosophy on being. So this is where you get the sense that you see Lenin navigating in these waters. And in fact, Marxism at the top level has always navigated in these waters. We can't say we have surrendered that space because they've been so effective in deracinating us from our awareness that we don't even know what space that's there to evacuate. And therefore, in the current status, there's no ability to push back. So the United Front effort is in full swing. I added something to this graphic here to just blow it up even more. This is the insurgency pyramid. The insurgency pyramid, which in a brief that we made, we overwrite with the political warfare to show they're perfectly synchronized. Okay, the one fits the other. Those black stripes along the side moving up to the overt level is the preparation for revolutionary cadres and masses for revolution. And where you see that dividing line, you see increased political violence, terror, and sabotage. And right above it, shadow government activities are now the norm. So if you see where that dotted line is on the insurgency pyramid, and you're only now coming to be aware of it, you're not allowed to join our team if you think you're just looking up. You have to know, and we have to know that you know that everything that happened beneath it has already happened. And you have to ask yourself why you didn't know it if this was your career, because it has been missed. And it's not because we're sticking fingers in chests, but it goes to our point that the way we do national security, we are completely blinded to the very concept of political war, in fact. And most of the stuff written about it are academic pieces that don't even touch with the nature of what we're looking at. So again, we have Hatem Bazium talking about the global south, and a lot of the synchronization operates along this global south narrative, and you see the Marxists use it as well. And so there we are, we're showing it. And yes, I think I did keep this from last week because it's important. It's one of those things I want to really pound into people, okay? When the Chinese brokered the deal between the Shia Iranians and the Wahhabi Saudis to have a cessation of hostilities, that's an unnatural temporary thing, which means that the window opened in March of last year. It's not sustainable, okay? And that's when we realized the game was on. And I think I removed the ones where we showed Al-Isa from the World Muslim League on behalf of the Islamic world. It's an element of Saudi Arabia, making all the rounds to line up all the interfaith entities. And that's why, again, I want people to look at burning down the house, because this is the Ummah lining up to open up the window so that the Dawah elements like the Brotherhood could lay the groundwork for violence. Here we have again, and because I think we have a slide from this week that brings up the fact that they're building bridges in the interfaith area. When the Islamic movement talks about building bridges, the bridges only go one way. If you hear somebody in the interfaith world or something that you can reasonably extrapolate to it, use the word building bridges. Whether they know it or not, they're engaging in an information campaign. And the information campaign is this Muslim Brotherhood one, originating from Sayyid Qutb. The chasm between Islam and Jahiliyyah is great. A bridge is not to be built across it so that the people on the two sides may mix with each other, but only so that the people of Jahiliyyah, that's you, can come over to the other side. There is absolutely no intention of ever meeting a Christian or Jewish, we're in the West right now, or other entity halfway. And they will posture that way when they're not going to do it. I go back to the second lecture where I made it clear how that works with those interfaith rules that basically silence everybody who may be just your standard Christian. When I say standard Christian, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. One who doesn't feel they should be guarding the henhouse because there's a level of trust that is being exploited. So we had these domestic front ones, and I removed them from last week, but we're going to repeat the blade stuff, the blade coverage, because here you have, I wish I should have gotten the other picture where they have a knife here. You're talking about the murder of Jews inspired by Palestinian waves of terrorism. Here's the fact that since 2015, the West, it has been announced that against the West, jihad will be with blades. So here you have a little child and a woman, how to hide a knife. Here's something that came out on how all the places, appropriate places to knife people. And here you have right here, the knife revolution coming to America. So this is like what we call in the intelligence world a tell, okay? What makes you think that they're going to use knife attacks? Well, they announced that's the way to go. They specifically said here. And so, I mean, you really have to start pushing back on people who choose not to know this. This is them announcing that. So here, I've covered the sources, but I want to run through this bluff. This was put out in a khutbah this last Friday. Khutbah is like a sermon in a major Islamic Center mosque. Islamic Center of XYZ, Islamic Center of North America, Islamic Center of Boston, Islamic Center of Kansas City, Islamic Center of Bloomington, Minnesota. If it has the word Islamic Center, it's usually under the operational control of the Islamic Center of North America Muslim Brotherhood entity. So you could generally extrapolate, if it's said in one, it's generally said in another. So here's what was put out in the khutbah last weekend. I now want to ask you if you think that this is green lighting from the Brotherhood, the next level of violence, and you're free to think what you want. And this is truncated. These remarks, dear brothers and respected sisters, Allah has blessed us and created us in the great form, and Allah has blessed us with a lot of faculties, with the necessary faculties that we need. Allah has blessed us with our five senses, the ability to see, to smell, to touch, to hear, to taste. But these faculties are not sufficient. For example, a person can see something as sharp, but their senses don't tell them what to do with the sharp object. What do I use it for? What benefit can I derive from it beyond the scope of the senses themselves? So that Allah then blessed us with another faculty, which is intellect. By the way, this is following that ancient classical Western philosophical line that we can reach back to the Platonic world on this line of reasoning. With what intellect can we rationalize? Can we assess? Can we draw conclusions we can use? But even with faculties of the senses and the intellect, it's still not sufficient, because now the person can see that there's something sharp. They can feel that it is sharp. With their intellect now, they are able to drive the conclusion that because it is sharp, I can use it for hunting. I can use it to slaughter an animal. And then the discussion drops a little bit. And then Allah gave us a third avenue of knowledge, which is then from Allah, the revelation from Allah, that we need Allah to inform us of that which we are able to conclude purely based off the faculties we have for these things beyond our ability to rationalize and conclude we need Allah, and then send them to inform us of that. It goes on, but of course, what do you think is being said about what they're supposed to do according to Allah when they discern they have sharp blades that can be used for slaughtering, ... So here you have the stabbings going on in Switzerland. You had the stabbings of women in a mall in Australia. You have Vice Guard, a child was stabbed outside of a synagogue, a baby in Philadelphia. And so now we're looking at last week, and I'm filtering in a couple things that also include stuff from the left, because you are not allowed to understand what you see in the Islamic side without recognizing as if the future success of any countering depended on it. So here you have this vote, and it was, I think, Rand Paul that put it out, a huge $60 billion vote to Ukraine, and all these members of Congress are flying a Ukrainian flag. I mean, for gosh sake. And then you see a Virginia congressman say the Ukrainian-Russia border is our border. So you see, they do understand why it's important to defend a border. So when at the same time they're not defending our border, they're not lacking an understanding of why that is. And I think that's why it is so important. So the example we use, and I converted my graphic over to a cluster bomb for a reason, but you know, Article 4 of the Constitution says that it will guarantee to every state in this union a Republican form of government. It shall protect each of them against invasion, and on application of the legislature or the executive against domestic violence. And each of them are overwritten in the current paradigm by republic. The word of the Constitution is replaced by democracy. And even the Republicans, we know at a very high level, they accepted the democratic use of the word democracy instead of republic. We know this is true, okay? So you can see that invasion has been overlapped by immigration and border, and you can see that if you dislike the violence, you're missing the fact that it's a peaceful protest. And so when these things impact, you kind of see that not only are those three things destroyed, but the very concept of Article 4 is destroyed. And I point out, and you know, I haven't looked at it, I should look at it, but I've been prodded a number of times that the big case in Texas about the sovereignty of Texas that they lost, one of the things left out of that discussion was they never used Article 4, Section 4 as part of the argument in Maine. And how do you do that as a state and not use that? And our suspicion is that the GOP has been a wall that you cannot lean your ladder against. And I just think there are certain people out there in the leadership elements of that party to see how many times the people that vote Republican will lean their wall against the ladder they guaranteed through experience will never hold their weight, and keep voting for them. So here you have, and I put that example there because here you have this man talking about borders, and he's poking Americans for wanting to talk about it as he defends a different border. And here you have Hakeem Jeffries talking about we must confront aggression against democracy and freedom, not appease it. House Democrats will make sure that bipartisan legislation for America's national security can proceed. But you cannot have national security if you accept the Marxist concept of democracy, which in a different presentation, we explain is the correct definition of democracy, and the traditional American use of the term, which has no foundation in the constitutional documents, is in fact wrong, okay? It's just romanticized. And we have Hakeem Jeffries again saying, we will never bend the knee to those who want to destroy our democracy, wanted to overturn the revolution of 2020 and take away our freedom. The freedom to what? Wage a revolution. So for those people who are interested, here are some links I have to stuff that we put together on democracy. And I think these are not live links here, it's an image. So if If there's interest in it, I can send them along. And again, another attack on Article 4, Section 4, democracy here. So as we move forward, I want to remind people of something. It is a fact that the governing entity in Gaza is Hamas. And it is a fact that Hamas is a registered terrorist organization. And as these student activities on campus come out and say they support Hamas, at what point, I think it was this from the beginning, I think CARE is Hamas. They certainly were formed out of Hamas. They just made it into a 501c3 and sent one of their members, a terrorist, back home when they were put on the FTO, the Foreign Terrorist Organization listed to State Department. Okay, but now that they're coming out and providing material support and violence on American soil, at what point did we start to understand these operations in the name of Palestine are actually foreign directed, even though if they're played out on U.S. territory, and recognizes as such? Because I do think it's not as hard as you think to make that, to convert on that. Here is a gentleman here posturing as Hamas. Here we go over to Columbia University. These are just going to be a series of pictures like this, just to show all the stuff we saw. Here we have the dean of Northwestern University behind this. Here you have a man running for Congress in, I think, New York, Die MAGA Die. They understand exactly what they're doing. And you need to understand that if you are a part of the populist American base who just happens to think that as messed up as the Constitution may be, it's a heck of a lot better than anything else out there, if only people would enforce it, which is the same as saying, if only our elected officials, by omission, that's the Republicans, and they're 100% guilty of omission, and that omission equals the commission of the Democrats. The commission cannot work without the omission. And so long as that's given a pass, then it's given a pass. And there's no ability to get to the acts of commission when you look past the omission. And so Die MAGA Die is about the fact that they all know that directly and indirectly this is an attack on the base. So here we have these activities going on at MIT. We see it going on at Columbia. We see here in this picture that Yale students are blocking Jews, American kids, Jewish kids, from being able to access the buildings. So here we have another picture at the, what is it, Beneke Plaza at Yale University, a liberated zone again, where Jews kids who are not allowed to access the campus there. I didn't snap the picture fast enough. This picture should have had a picture of the Palestinian flag waving next to a burning American flag. And I think this is at Columbia University. This is at Columbia University, Al-Qassam Brigade. You know, this is danger close to just supporting terrorism. So in another one, Columbia University, a anti-Semitic attack, you know, Shabbat Shalom MFR, right? So this is out in the open. This is sanctioned activity. We have to start raising the question of whether this activity, which is calculated and calibrated to become violent, it's already at the quasi-terror level, is going to be, should be understood as state-sponsored and not necessarily from abroad, because we're reaching a level where that's a question that cannot be put aside or assumed not to be true, because this is illegal. And here you have a gentleman basically saying, I think this is Columbia and Harvard, my gosh, what's happening? So I want people to think very clearly that what you saw go on this weekend at the Ivy League campuses is a very good replica of what happened in 1938. And in fact, you could basically say this was America's Kristallnacht. And if you want to say you don't see that, I'm telling you, if you didn't see it, you should understand why you didn't see it, And if you want to push back, you better ask yourself why, because I think that's exactly what we're seeing. And if we wait for people on this call for Fox to cover it accurately, well, it might be over. So here we have freedom for Palestine means death to America. Somebody asked me what it meant when they said from the river to the sea, and I answered it. And the question is, Hamas is Gaza is governed by Hamas. Hamas has something like over 90% popularity ranking in Gaza. So in a sense, they're like the Germans in World War II. The reason you had to fight the German population was because they backed Hitler. So you were not just at war with the party, you were at war with the people who supported the party. and Article 7 of the Hamas covenant, as we covered a while ago, says that their goal is to kill all Jews, and they quoted sacred hadith from Bukhari and Muslim to make that point. The day will come when a Jew hides behind a tree, the bushes and trees will say, "Oh, Muslim, there is a Jew behind me, come kill him." Okay, that's in their covenant, not their constitution. And who do you have covenants with? God. So they're calling this the third intifada. So when they say from the river to the sea, it's retaking that territory and eradicating the population. The Israelis are fighting a brutal war that everybody wants to call genocide, but it's actually the Palestinians who are openly calling for genocide if they can get the upper hand. And there is a difference. So, and the brutal war was brought on by the fact, of course, that the Hamas invaded, moved into Israel, and they directly attacked very soft, non-military, domestic targets. And we know they did all these bad things, not because it was Israeli propaganda. Actually, initially they pushed back on it. We know because they did GoPros and they released them to cheering crowds in the Palestinian territory. So here you have this coming from the Flood for Gaza in New York University. And at the bottom, I want you to take a look at the term by any means possible. Here from 2020, you have the former vice president running for president, making his commitment to making certain commitments following a hadith that puts him in line with that. So, and now what you see is this material that it adds to the material we saw last week, where what we saw last week was all them coming out with direct action documents, reminding you that direct action has a very specific Marxist meaning to it. Here, as the pigfoot soldier of imperialism brutally cracked down on our protest, this is very caustic language. And of course, I do believe a woman in England got arrested for saying Allah, Allah. Who is Allah? People, I do believe, are starting to wake up. So I want to put a huge caveat on this. I think this was during the Passover, and the translations that have come out are more direct. I've asked a couple people who are fluent in Arabic, and the statement was made in more couched terms, but it did have the sense of, I'm going to see, October 7th is only the beginning, we will eliminate the Jews. That wasn't expressly said that way, but what was said, this is the head of Qatar, what was said was along those lines. And remember, this is our coalition ally, right? It's our coalition ally. And of course, other sources brought it out, and I think even the Israelis reported it. And here you have more riots in the flood. Flood equals Hamas speaks for attack. What I'm trying to get here is there's overwhelming presence here. And if you're watching the regular news, you get snippets of it that understate what you see going on. We got some more here. We see some more here. We have the flood for Gaza here. We have this at Columbia University, a message to the souls of nations and pigs of the earth. Paradise lies in the shadow of the swords. When I was briefing these quotes 10 years ago, I was called a hater. If I brief them today, I'm still called a hater. But here it is, they're right out in front of you. Here, a congressman's office was attacked with red paint. I do believe, you know, the blood. And here you have Moriarty right out in front of, I think it was George Washington University, making some pretty strident comments in these slides that I made available. They have the links in them if you want to listen to them, get your own estimation. Here you have Hatem Bazium, the person I was quoting last week for his use of the word intersectionality. He too was at, I'm trying to think of where this, see where this is, Berkeley. They're out in the open and they're present. So here you have this man Hirsch, and he's a U.S. citizen, and he's 200 days in to being a prisoner, held in I would imagine, well, he's held by the Palestinian leadership in Gaza, I assume in Gaza. But you know, I have it on pretty good knowledge that even given all the Americans who are held captive, that the president did not order the standing up of our hostage release groups to even get ready to liberate these people. So they're sitting back on this. And here again, you have a Yale, somebody at the Yale protest publishing the list of all the police officers associated with the Yale police. Now, this is one of those things where you can easily associate this with a target list, and it's certainly intimidation. This is something that the police should be responding to. And here you have in Israel, the police going up to this Jewish man because there's a Hamas protest in the streets there. And what's going on? This police is very kindly telling this Jewish man, young man, that you should get out of here. You have a right to be here, but you shouldn't be here because we're not going to protect you if you get beat up. Yeah, right. And so I kind of think that what you're seeing is the calibrated state acting, lowering of standards of protection in a calculated way so that people get used to it when they finally pull the drawstring on it. Here's an analogy to 1968 to 2024. Here's a man at, I think, Columbia calling for the killing of all Jews. Here you see a report from within Cal Poly that talks about what to do, where they actually talk about if you build it, they will come, how to occupy the buildings. The movement must be a movement against the police. You can clearly see they're going after the police. And discussions I've had with some police officers, they are saying right out that they have our tradecraft. They're watching what we're doing. They know how to react. This is paramilitary in nature. And then here's just something that raises the question of state action. National Students for Justice, you see up in the upper left, right, it's in French, in the middle it's in English, and it trails off in Arabic. But this talks to international coordination. So this should also be touching international considerations. And here you have call to action to support, conceal your identity, be ready for a fight. Okay, here you have a government news agency. They're telling you right there, they're covering things live at Harvard, MIT, Yale, Columbia, Stanford, and they're on site. And here you have talking points to use. The link in the slides are there, so you can read exactly how they're going to message, and you can watch the message, and then you can watch when people reply to that messaging and be accused of hate speech for saying something like that. So we're going to wind down here. Give me just a couple more minutes. And here's from the last hutbah, and now these are the talking points that just came out. So you can see what their talking points are, and you can see that everything you're seeing is planned. I think this stuff was locked up and ready to go last June. So we are talking about political warfare. So I want to bring it back to this in conclusion for this 4-part series. And I want to bring you back to Marcuse, where he said the domination of this democracy still leaves room for building of autonomous local bases. The increasing technological scientific requirements of production and control make the universities into such a base to establish counter cadres. From the campuses, it has its own base in the infrastructure itself. Moreover, this base extends from the campuses to the economic and political institutions where educated labor is needed. New scientific revolution. The long march includes the concerted effort to build up counter institutions, which are counter state operations that you could see, he said, would start from the campuses. And in fact, it is starting from the campuses, just as they said they would do. And these are mass line forming activities that come right out of chapter 11 of Mao's Little Red Book, titled The Mass Line. This is a touchy slide here, because for 2 years, Rich and I were talking about the mass line, and all of our experts on Marxism would come and say, what are you talking about the mass line? I thought you were going to talk about Marxism. And so finally we had to rub people's nose in it. I mean, actually rub their nose in it. Like, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. Are you still reading Das Kapital and think that that's Marxism in Maine? Because it actually never was. This is Marxism in Maine. And with that, because I think we're going over, I just wanted to kind of close it to the circle that if the Marxists who were planning this in 1972 got what they wanted, we would see this type of violence starting on college campuses exactly the way we see it. They are exactly on schedule, and our national media won't talk about it. The president has ordered people not to understand the far left as radical or potential terrorist or the Islamic movement. So with that, what I'd like to do is conclude this briefing, and people can look at the other slides on their own. And if there's ever time to do the Christian national movement, which is not what it appears to be, it is a united front effort between the Marxist left and the Islamic movement, and it has been from the beginning. So with that, I'd like to conclude this presentation and open things up to questions if there's interest.
Thanks very much, Steve. Another fine presentation and a great series, all 4-part. You did mention that in one of your news items that these protesters are concealing their identity. So there's a lot of masking going on, and I don't recall that in campus protests from the 1960s. So does that have any significance for you, the fact that these people are masking up?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're concealing their identity. I think that people want to think that that they're thinking, you know, one of the major flaws of Marxism is that we are made to think that it's the poor working class, and that may have the cadres on some major street operation, but on university campuses, the leadership of these Marxist movement come from upper class families and from the professors there. So I think that they have to conceal their identity, because if they're known, people will people will draw the conclusion. I also think that, you know, if they're engaged, people should make a decision to unmask them and get them to unmask themselves.
In addition to educating ourselves, what would you advise us to do?
I don't think we're moving forward. You know, I'm going to go to the classical deliberate decision-making process, and everybody is on go. They haven't done the OPE, the intelligence preparation, the operations preparation of the battle space. They just want to do something. They want to do something. And everything we want to do when we want to do something is like it's not like, what's the thing called when the squirrel comes up in holes, you know, whack-a-mole? It's not whack-a-mole, because they have 3 different people on every hole. They have every hole you're going to come up on. So I think my point is, we have to get smart. And that I'm not saying we don't respond to events as they happen. We have to do that, but we have to respond in a way that that works for us. And it's not, and so we have to at least know how to desynchronize them. We also have to know how not to respond to them in a manner that builds their ability to move further on what they want to do, furthers their mission. Because almost all of our responses is for the purpose of defeating us or to advance their cause. So that kicks to the next thing. There is no ability to do operational preparation of the battle space until you've done the intelligence preparation of the battle space. You have to know them pure. You have to know them pure, then you have to know them applied, And then you have to recognize there's two things you have to recognize: the Islamic movement and then the Marxist movement, and how they integrate, and how they're completely interoperable along the Marxist line of attack. And actually, once you get to the point where you recognize that, you can orient on what they're doing and respond and reply. But we've actually, unconstrained analytics and some of the things we've done, we've actually broke with people, because it's like we can't be in this call where we put out something and all of a sudden you guys, you're like, it's like you wind up a car and it keeps hitting the glass every time, and every time it hits the glass and gets broken, everybody gets shocked. Why didn't it break this time? And so I think that we have to recognize that we're completely dead in the water. And the way we've been thinking about how we're thinking about these things is the problem. And in fact, it's not just the problem, it is the outcome of a sustained series of information campaigns to get us to a demoralized state where we don't understand, we don't even have the information on which to support the decisions we want to do. We are stuck in the circle looking for the corner in the round room. So I think it's a complete reset.
And you may have answered some of this. Do you anticipate the possibility of the summer becoming a summer of rage, fueled by the leftist Marxist movement? And I would add to that, could you give us a little bit of detail about what you and your team think this summer might look like? Is it going to look like, what was that guy in Baltimore, Freddie Gray, I think, with the big riots there? Is it going to look like George Floyd? What do you think it will look like, if you think it's going to happen?
They are actually looking for a Floyd event, okay? And one of the things I point out in 2020 is it was going to start in Minnesota. And this becomes a contentious thing and people don't want to talk about this. But the autopsy for Floyd revealed that there was no indicator on any line of an autopsy test that showed that anything had to do with asphyxiation or being choked. He didn't have choke marks on him. There were camera angles that showed that what you saw wasn't what it looked like. And as important, what you did see in those pictures was the fact that they were propping a dead body up. He died of an overdose. There was nothing about what happened there that was going to be changed by what the police did or didn't do. So when the Floyd event was blown up the way it was already to some degree disinformation. And people think that, how did they get away with it? Well, that's the way they want to roll. Because if you want to get into a public argument with that, good luck with that. You could lose your job, okay? You could lose everything. And let's go back to what we said in day one of the first brief, that when the Republican establishment allowed Trump to be impeached on charges that came from star chamber processes that were extra legal, they knew that they would be able to have show trials, which they had in Minnesota. There were so many ways that trial was wrong. And yet, when I grew up, I grew up in Minnesota, and we used to make fun of the South. And I think right now, that's a big black hole what happened there. So going to your question about what can happen, I think we could see that maybe an escalation of what they accomplished in 2020. I think that they're looking to continue on that. They are not, when I say they're looking to do that, they're saying they're looking to do that. Now, I think there's two lines of ways to look at this. And I tend to think one, I do not allow myself the luxury of believing it to the exclusion of the other. And that is, I think they're running out of steam. I think that they've lost the bubble. I think the trans issue really set them back, okay, because that hit deep into the population. That's where you started seeing no, and so, but you're not seeing this in reporting. Why do I say that? Because you might think that we can lay back, and that's exactly not correct. Because if they believe they're losing compression, they're going to bring it, and they may bring it. They may overbring it. They may overpulse the system to compensate for losing traction. So I'm not quite sure what I'm looking at right now. It looks very ominous right now, but I'm very aware of, starting with the protests. They started in January, and some of the ones we saw in March, they seemed like they were not getting the lift that they thought they were going to get out of them. What we're seeing on these college campuses, You know, that's painting a different picture. So the question will be, to your question, I think if they have their way, if they I think they have decision points on what they're going to do. Fair enough. It's time driven. They wanted to really hit full stride in May, move into the summer, but they're going to hit decision points where they go this way or that way, and it's going to be based on whether they get escalation or not. But I think if they have it in their sight picture that they could bring it all down. If they get the right azimuth, I think they have people thinking that. I think it's so important for people to understand that the level of foreign activity involved in this is such that the idea that we're not even addressing that is simply outrageous. I showed that Turkey Anadolu news agency and how closely Turkey's watching that. And you get the sense that some of the things that come out of the Muslim Brotherhood meetings here are published by Turkey there, okay, as if our position is that Turkey has operational, or the AKP has operational control of the Muslim Brotherhood. We think that. We have briefs that explained that back in the day. We showed why. And I think that even if you walk away not convinced, we certainly put enough in there to show that this is a serious argument. And I think we do make the point. So I think this could be a very rocky summer, or it could deflate pretty quickly.
And we're coming up on the end of the hour, so I'm going to ask you to take a step back and ask you if you have any final words to tie the whole four-part series together. Any final words on the entire series?
Well, thank you. I think part of the four-part series got interrupted by reality, where we're seeing this escalation, and I thought it was important to bring this in. But what I wanted to really bring out with political warfare is that political warfare is a form of warfare that exists in fact. So that, you know, one of the things I want to do is show that it exists, then to show that the left is applying it, and then to show that the Islamic movement joined in on it. And I wanted to do that so that we could start to see that since 2016, when we put the Islamic movement strategy inside the United States, we said there was a joint united front effort, that we're not speaking metaphorically. We mean that there is a joint effort. Fair enough? And that as such, we need to recognize it that way. We also have to start raising the picture that this stuff that's going on in this country cannot be happening at this level. The mass immigration into what are historically Christian areas that then all of a sudden, like clockwork, 4 or 5 years later, lawsuits to, you know, separation of church and state along, you know, very hostile lines to negate that. That at some point you have to recognize that the powers that be in this country want that to happen, and that's why it's happening. And if you skip over that piece of the pie, you're not going to be able to get to, you know, you can't fight the 10-meter enemy if the 1-meter enemy has got a knife right here at your throat, right? You can't. You have to take the things that are holding your arms to keep you from fighting are the things that have to be negotiated before you can take the 10-meter threat, and certainly before you can take the 50-meter threat. And yet all this time, when you hear people talking about the threat from the left, it goes right from college campus to China. Oh, okay. Well, what about 95% of the things we see going on before China with the left? So I would say what I think we accomplished, and I'd like to see if you agree with this, is we're able to show that all these things are in fact integrated. There is command and control that is both national, international, and synchronized. And we can see how they play off each other, resulting in what we see going on right now. You know, if this were a 4-part series that ended last week, everything would have been set for events today, so everything would be here, so they could see it. We left out the Christian nationalism movement, which is a major line of effort, but I think given what we're talking about, it's subsumed in some of this, and it could be developed some other time. Does that answer your question? Is that good for you?
It does. Very good for me. Very good for all of us. Thank you for a great 4-part series. Thanks everybody for being here. That'll do it for tonight. And we'll see you some other time in the future. We will have more webinars this year. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.